Counselor George Hanley, Counselor Becky Bogdan, myself, Patrice McKay, Counselor Rachel Whipple, and Craig Christensen. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. When speaking, please be sure to use a microphone so the record is clear and those attending virtually can hear you. Please also be sure to limit side conversations as they interfere with this audio recording. If you have a side conversation, please step out of the workroom. It is proposed that we approve the following minutes, September 3rd, 2024. Are there any objections or requested changes? All right, seeing no objection, I declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. Our first item of business is the presentation regarding the fiscal year 2024 budget carryover report. And this will be presented by Andrea Wright, our budget analyst.
Welcome to the budget carryovers of FY 24 to 25. What the process of for carryovers is we go through after all the expenses that have been paid out for the year. We look at the remaining operating budget now and see what is left over, or POs that are designated for certain projects that haven't been spent all the way yet. And then the departments go ahead and submit those requests to carry over that funding to the next fiscal year. Once it's submitted, we go ahead and compile a list and review the carryover list. Then we present it to the mayor. She goes through and reviews what she does approve and doesn't. And then now we present the list to you after I explain what kind of types there are. Sorry, breathe. So in blue, you will see that those are the encumbered on purchase orders. Those mean that they're actual projects that we've already committed those fundings to, that it just wasn't completed all of the way in FY 24. The ones in green are the historical universe agreed upon carryovers, which are like the capital accounts or grant balances or tuition. And then the FY 24 budget unspent are ones in yellow that are kind of their wish list of using or how to utilize those expenses that they actually haven't used yet. And then I don't think we have any critical equipment ones this year. And then the purple are per budget ordinance. Here's a list of the budget ordinance that the council has approved on what are automatic carryover of funds to go to the next year. And then we included in the presentation our simplified version of the carryover list that just kind of makes it not such of an eyesore, and so you won't get it lost in the weeds. I don't know, is there any, did you guys review those in your packet? Are there any ones that you want to kind of go over, have questions about? Just kind of review them. And it does make it a lot nicer, the color coordination as well. Once we're done presenting it to the council, you guys, then the mayor will go ahead and do her signing, and then we'll carry over that budget from FY 24 to 25 so they can start utilizing those funds. Our carryover is a little bit different and lower this year. Reason being is we've been open and upfront with the council and the departments from the beginning that we were expecting a revenue shortfall. And so we did alert them that carryovers were going to be minimal. We also did implement our payroll savings this year, which means that departments were not able to utilize payroll budget for anything other than payroll. And then John, if he wants to come up, since it kind of goes over the revenue shortfall and how we were able to cover that, we'll go ahead and explain this.
Thank you, Andrea. I just want to mention a couple things and maybe even further emphasize some things that Andrea shared. But 2024 really was a little bit of a challenging year from a revenue perspective, we were down about 2.5 million. The one thing I would mention is that we started meeting with the directors in October, letting them know that we were anticipating a shortfall, and it wound up coming in a little bit on the high end of what we'd expected, but it wasn't something that caught us by surprise. We met every single month and more often with administration to talk about plans and ways. And one of the ways that we've dealt with this shortfall was the payroll turnover, or the savings, the amount that was not utilized in their payroll budgets. As Andrea mentioned, we did not allow any transfers to cover operating expenses, and that came in at $1.7 million. Pretty significant, pretty big part of it. We also went in early on, and each of the departments were asked. Not only were we looking at ways to balance the 2024 budget, but at the same time, starting in January and February, we were talking with the directors about how we were going to balance the 2025 budget, which many of you were involved with. And each of the departments were proactive and stepped up and came up with ways to save and to help balance the budget. One of the ways the administration helped was with some budget savings for fiscal 24 of $300,000. And so those two together provide about $2 million. As we mentioned, we were $2.5 million short. And so by the way, I'll just let you know that I've been involved with carryovers now for 28 years. And I can tell you right now that I've never seen a year where turnover carryovers were scrutinized more. And it's just what I would consider to be a very lean and conservative numbers that were carried over. But I will mention that in situations where it made sense and it was the right thing to do. I mean, if they're committed to an expense, it just didn't quite happen, and the actual final payment or a portion of the payments didn't happen till 2025. In those situations, we were supportive, but other than that, we were we were very careful. So we did have about 1.2 million. So the good news is we had budget savings of about 3.2 million. And then if you look at the general fund revenue shortage of 2.5 million, that leaves a surplus available about 735,000. I would mention though that during the year, we had appropriations that came before the council of about $1 million, okay, which comes out of a fund balance. And the most significant of those was a $650,000 appropriation to cover the loan related to property that was purchased adjacent to the airport. So still, we're trying to be concerned. So what we've done for the last several years is we've set aside money for the innovation fund, roughly 25% of the balance that's available. Then we've also set aside money for employee recognition. Well, we looked at the balance that was in the employee recognition that was carried over and met with the mayor and administration and felt like, you know, we have an adequate balance. So we are going to recommend, based on kind of where we're at and the shortfall and whatnot, to not add or take any money. So we're not recommending that we add to the employee recognition, which would have been the same amount, the 183,786.58. And so we're not recommending that. The other thing that we've done for the last 2 years is we've added money to the local government disaster fund. And we started that in 2022. Right now, the balance in that fund is $1,772,000. Excuse me. Right now, as of right now, it's $1,788,416. So it's pretty significant. If we follow what we've been doing the last couple of years, we would take 20% of that available, and that would and the 20% that we normally would have done would have been 73,515. I would also mention that if you looked at the fact that we're not adding anything to the employee recognition and just went with that balance at 20%, it'd be 110,272. So just want to make a couple notes and then just let you know it's up to the council on what the council would like to do as far as whether they add to the disaster recovery fund. Yes. Basically, couple things. Number one, there has to be a disaster that's declared, okay? And then the other option would be I kind of did some research on this, and Justin, I don't know if you have, it doesn't say anything about whether the governor has to declare a disaster, but it says it has to be a declared disaster. And I don't know if that's something that the mayor can just do. I wouldn't think so.
It's the governor.
It is the governor.
And the governor has to do it. There's like certain things that have to qualify to make it a disaster.
Okay, so it is required to be declared by the governor. Yes.
And is this, the disaster fund, is this administered by the state? So does this money go to Salt Lake and they
No.
hold it, or do we hold
We
it?
have a separate account. We have a state pooled interest bearing account that's designated as the Provo local gap disaster fund. And it's there and it's earning interest. Now, we do not have access to it unless there is a declared disaster, or there's a certain portion that can be done each year. It's kind of small, but you can actually do some training and some disaster recovery training that can qualify. But it's a smaller amount. Other than that, that's those are the only two resources. The point that I've made before, and I'll make it again, is that the state allows the city to have 35% fund balance, okay? And I've done a rough estimate, and it looks like we're going to be approximately 31% at the end of this year. One of the nice things about fund balance is it's there, and it can be there to help in disaster, but it can also be there to help in other challenges like a revenue shortfall, like something that just causes the economy to drop significantly from some worldwide event, or it could be a strong need for a piece of property or some other need that comes up. Or, as you know, we've had situations where with our police or fire or employees where we've needed to do a mid-year appropriation to help be competitive and remain competitive. It just provides a lot more latitude, yet it's still there in the event where if it goes into this disaster fund, you're very limited in what can be done. And so,
Counselor Garrett.
yes.
So how on what is an adequate disaster fund or inadequate? If the governor declares a disaster, does the state have funds as well? Do they allow a city to have a balance equal to 10% of the state fund? We would need some context for knowing what our fund, should look like.
Yeah, I don't know if that's ever really been discussed on what level that would be. There is one other benefit to having money in the state in this local disaster fund is that if the fund's been being funded over a 5-year period and you're meeting certain levels, you can qualify for loans in the event of a disaster, and they have, based on the percentage and the amount that you have, various rates that you qualify, which may be better than what we could do otherwise, or maybe not, but that's one of the other benefits. But I know there was just kind of a desire, and the council had wanted to build some funds up there so they would have something in the event of a disaster.
So to clarify, we have this local government disaster fund. Can't be used unless the governor declares a disaster. But did you say there's another fund that we have up at the state where we have money sitting there and it's earning interest, or is this it?
This is it.
This is it.
Yep.
So like when Orem had the flooding recently, it was declared a disaster by the governor. And they would have pulled from this type of fund in order, if they had one.
Yeah, we haven't been able to find another
City.
entity in the state that has one.
So then to Gary's point, did the state have funds that they utilized? They have disaster funds, I would assume.
Well, I would imagine that I don't know, I would imagine that there are disasters that happen throughout the state, that the state could step in, or of course, FEMA or whoever else could step in as well. But this was just designed to be there so that we could have additional protection.
So, Councilor Hoban, I just pulled the statute. So declared disaster under state law includes federally, state, or local declared disaster. So the mayor could declare a disaster, the federal government or the state could. So we've got a little broader bandwidth there, to John's point. It couldn't be used if we considered this like a financial disaster. They do have spelled out in code a number of things that it can be used for. So emergency disaster services include those things that we think of typically in the event of a natural type disaster. So a little broader than I think we initially thought, but also narrow in the kind of scope of what type of disaster.
Chair McKay. Could I make a couple other comments too?
Yep.
Just some background context to Councilor Garrett's point, right? I mean, this was something that was put in place by the council a couple of years ago, but several of the councilors are new. So again, most, as John pointed out, I don't know that we know of anybody else is doing this. Most cities just use their general fund balance for all emergencies, these kind of disaster emergencies, financial emergencies, whatever it is. This was a special program that was created by the state. It's not mandatory. It's entirely optional to participate. As John mentioned, the incentive to participate is that if you participate at a certain level for long enough, then you get access to certain low interest loans in the event of a disaster. But at the end of the day, as I understand it, there's three benefits, if you want to think of it as of participating, which is access to the loans, the fact that the money put in here can't be spent for something else. So it's a way to save specifically for these things and not save for other things. And correct me if I'm wrong, John, that the money that's in here doesn't count towards the limit on the general fund. So it's
Right.
actually a way to save more money than you otherwise could. Is that
Yeah,
right?
and if we were at 35%, I think there would be a stronger argument, at least from my perspective, to be able to have additional funds. The other thing I would say is that regardless of what happens, if the council decided not to add to it this year, we still have that balance of roughly 1.8 million. We earned 90,000 last year on interest. That would continue to happen. It's just the decision of whether or not you'd like to keep up. The other thing I would mention is that there's two calculations that we've done in the past that go into this. The first calculation is this, take this portion of money that's left over from carryovers to add to it 20%. The other calculation is the change in fund balance of 10%. That we don't know until the annual comprehensive financial report is complete. We actually have the audited numbers, and then if there's a portion if the number is positive, then we take 10% of that and then come back to council and say, yeah, do you want to add this? And so this is just the first portion for fiscal 2024.
Councilor Whipple.
The interest that we're earning on that, is that coming to us into our general fund, or is it going into this disaster fund?
Going to disaster fund.
Okay, so even if we're not contributing to it, it's growing every year because of the interest.
It is.
Okay,
Yeah, that's correct. And that's basically, we've set it up the way the state code is defined, and so that's the way it's working. So that's a good question.
Councilor Christensen.
This is very helpful because I've never been square on this. So we've got the local government disaster fund. Can't touch unless it's government. I've always thought it was a rainy day fund. Is that just the surplus general fund balance?
Yeah, that's another word for just the general fund balance.
Yeah, and of course, that has no restrictions. We could use it for a number of different purposes.
As long as the council appropriates it, yes,
And that can be up to 34%.
35%. And it's roughly 31% right now.
Councilor Bogdan.
Handlings first.
Oh, Councilor Hanley.
Let's see, got my question. Come back to me.
Councilor Bogdan.
Excited.
What's the amount of participation that we have to do in order to qualify for those loans? Will the added interest be a level of participation, or do we actually physically have to put in 5%, 10%, 11%?
So what the limit that you can put,
I want the bare minimum, not the limit.
okay, well, this will
Okay.
help me explain it. So basically, the most that you can put in is 10% of general fund revenues per year, okay? Which is far above where we've been putting in, okay? But it says that if you are between 9 and 10%, you get the state prime rate. If you're between 7 and 9%, it'd be 2%, 5 and 7 would be 4%. And then less than 5 is not eligible, which we are less than 5, even as much as we've been putting in each year.
Oh, okay. So we don't even qualify. Right?
And it has to be, and it's a 5-year term, you have to do it for, so anyway, that's kind of a little bit of background.
Thanks.
I remember my question.
Councilor Hanley.
Yeah, it was sort of related to this. So, I mean, I did not remember that first of all, I can't believe we have 1.8 million in there. How is that possible? I thought we were talking about like a couple $100,000 a year that we were going to be putting.
So we started in 2022, and I can give you a copy of the schedule if you'd like.
Yeah.
We started in fiscal 22. We had 234,000 that was contributed from carryover, what we're talking about today. And then we had 250,000 from change in fund balance. So there was about a $500,000 between those two calculations in 22. Then in 23, we actually had 322,000 that went in from the carryover session like today. And then we had 600,000 that went in from fund balance. So we had about $1 million in 23, which brought us up to $1.5 million.
Okay.
And then in 24, last year, for this calculation, that was done for, let's see, I'm just looking at this. Yeah, if we had the 225, I'm checking on that, because we're here on 24 right now. So,
Interest.
what's that?
Interest.
And then we have interest each of the years, so yeah, that's basically how we got that.
That's I mean, that's a lot more money than I thought we were putting away, and it makes me sad to think that we've put away that much money that we can't touch. Although I'm glad, I suppose we'll be glad when the disaster comes. But I think the idea that I recall was it's going to be a relatively modest amount, and that it would sort of, assuming we would eventually get to the 35% in the general fund, then this would allow us to put away a little bit more. So I first of all, I have no problem not putting the money in, but I guess the question is, I thought we were sort of obligated to. So if we're not obligated to, and we're already below any sort of benefits that we're going to get from the state, I mean, I guess it's an open question for us to wrestle with as a council as to whether or not this is something we want to continue to do, or is this something we want to say, we'll evaluate it every single year. I can imagine lots of reasons why we might say we don't want to put it there. That's why I kind of, in my memory, had sort of assumed that we had to put in some sort of minimal amount, and that
This was Chipley's thing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I remember that. I just thought we were sort of saying 200,000 to 300,000 a year.
So he had made a rule of what was it, the 10% of the carryover or something, like what was it? 20%.
Carryover is 20%.
He made it 20% of the carryover, like he wanted us to do that, like he was his own rule.
I got it. Okay.
I've done a calculation. It would have been, if we had put that money in the general fund and not left it in the general fund and not pulled it out for disaster recovery, it would have equaled to about 2%. So we would have, instead of being 31% right now, we've been about 33%. So still not max, but closer. So the other thing that we did commit to council, and that's why we're here today, is that we would do the calculation, and in these meetings, we would come back and just let you know what the amount would be, and then give the council the option to see what they want to do.
Okay. Well, at the very least, I appreciate that, because I think if it's fully up to our discretion, and this is money that once put in can only be used for that one thing, I think it seems prudent that we would be careful about not putting too much away. that we might need for other purposes.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the message that's coming from administration too, is that this is a year where been a little bit rainy, you know, we've had some shortfalls in revenues, and true, we've made some proactive measures to try to offset those, but it's likely, it might be a good year to skip adding money to the local disaster recovery fund, and just put it in fund balance to help us plan for the future, just a thought.
Yeah, I agree that I would like to focus on getting to our 35%. But Councilor Hoban?
Yeah, if you're looking for a signal, I'd say, I think we've far exceeded expectations on this fund in the couple of years that we've done it. So I think we're great for now. Evaluate it each year, but I'm okay holding off on contributing to it this year.
Agreed. And I guess I would say, signals are great, but my recollection, the administration did this entirely because the council made a motion telling them to. So a motion would be better than a.
I just wasn't sure what was appropriate for this meeting, but
No, I get that. That's why I was clarifying.
I'll make a motion that we don't contribute to that fund this year.
I second that.
All right, we have a second, any discussion on the motion? All right, let's take a vote. Councilor Garrett.
Yes.
Councilor Hanley.
Yes.
Councilor Bogdan.
Yes.
Councilor McKay, yes. Councilor Whipple.
No,
Councilor Hoban.
Yes.
Councilor Christensen.
Yes.
All right, that passes 6-1.
Thank you.
and it kept staying until I'm alone.
Councilor Garrett.
One more question, John. Early in your presentation, you said that in October of last year, you put the directors on notice that the next fiscal year would be lean. We're just a couple of weeks away from this October. Do you have a feel yet? You're always really good at making prognostications, how we're looking for next budget year.
So, good question, and we are watching it closely. A couple of things just to be aware of, we may have mentioned this, but when we got our final distribution for fiscal 2024, which was just about 3 weeks ago, the sales tax revenue came in quite a bit lower, and we were concerned. So a real good indication will be, and right now it's the 17th, so in about a week and a half, we'll get our first distribution for fiscal 25 for July, and that'll be helpful for us to see. And then what we'll also do is that we do kind of a monthly projection based on that information, and so it's still a little early, but we're on it, and we're gonna be just like we were last year. We're gonna be looking at it, and we'll keep the council informed too.
Thank you.
Right, thanks, John. All right, next, a policy item referred from the Planning Commission. This is a discussion regarding ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding signs permitted in the downtown zones, and presented by Aaron Ardmore.
This project, this amendment actually came up from business owners on Center Street, and they came to us and we talked about the best way to handle it, and I think we got to a good spot. So let me show you kind of, it's a new sign type that we're proposing to put in the downtown zone, but it's not exactly new because it's been here before, as you can see. So the regulations are kind of focused here. So bring it in as a new sign type permitted, but initially just restricted to 3 per block face, restrict the height, how it's lit, and then typical hold harmless for the other protective signs that we have in the downtown area. So that's the proposal. This is going to be on your agenda tonight. So if you have any questions, you know.
Any questions for Aaron? Councilor Bogdan.
So I watched the planning commission meeting and I did head up Gary Winterton yesterday. Why exactly was this removed from, how long ago was this removed and why was this removed from code?
I can't answer those questions. I was here, I don't know.
Bill, you're old enough to.
You mean Marquise?
Yeah.
I suspect that if you go back. I suspect that if you go back and look at the historic drawings of photographs of Center Street during the 70s, it was a lot of sign clutter. Think Orange State Street.
That's what you
So I
said.
think when they wrote these downtown zones, or even before that, this even goes back, these sign prohibitions go back even before the new downtown zones. They began paring back the amount of signage on Center Street.
Going to the blade signs.
Yes, that's correct. So this opens the door a little bit, but by restricting it to 3 per block face, we don't think we're going to create the sign clutter that we had years ago.
Is it sign clutter or is it like brightness of, because I've heard that the neon signs are brighter than what we've got today.
So neon still won't be allowed on these, so when these come in for building permits, neon won't be part of it.
So it'll have that light, so it won't be like
Spec benefits sense.
crackle sign. Okay, thanks.
Hey, Travis.
Well, yeah, mixed feelings about this, I guess. We actually kind of visited this a couple years ago when we did a revamp of the signage ordinances that we have. And we determined to just keep it as is. Because kind of what happens with these signs, I think, is you end up having like an arms race. Like, oh, the guy next door to me has this big bright sign. I need to have a big bright sign. The upside is that they're still internally lit, or, you know, as opposed to like a neon. Like, just anecdotally, when you drive down Center Street at night, I mean, the neon sign is so bright. Even small little neon signs and windows are, you know, exponentially brighter than externally lit, or, you know, some of these like traditional signs. But I don't know. I guess to what end, or like, why are we doing this? Because I just don't think somebody drives down Center Street and is like, oh, there's Thread. I didn't know Thread was here before. You know, I just don't see it. And I prefer to keep the downtown less cluttered, personally, visually. I like that it, you know, we don't have bunches of signs, you know, sticking out everywhere, and we have ordinances that prohibit really bright signs and things. So I think I just prefer to keep it as is. I don't see how this really is going to like drive a ton of business to, you know, to downtown. I think people are going to find what they're looking for downtown, even if these just remain as is with blade signs. My personal opinion.
Councilor Garrett.
So I know when I first heard about this, with Rachel's help and Quinn talking about improving the downtown area, for Thread's part, they were looking to restore a historic look. Basically, their proposed design matches the Goodyear sign that was there when the property was owned by the Anderson family. I didn't see in the writing necessarily any requirement that they try to match a historic look, or that it would be for those businesses that before had. So this would give us 5 historic signs downtown, all of them, the 4 existing plus this additional one, if we approve this and Thread went ahead. And all of them would match the original look of the signs. Is there any intent that way here to match historic look or feel? Or could they put up anything as long as it meets these criteria?
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 parts of that. We had that discussion about, you know, should they have to be a business that's in a building that and prove that they used to have this type of sign? So we had that discussion, and we thought that was a little too overregulated.
Okay.
But at the same time, this is Center Street between 5th and 2nd is a historic district. So anytime the sign building permit comes in, we check that with our historic planner, and if he feels appropriate, takes it to the Landmarks Commission. So there is that additional kind of level of review to make sure it fits into this historic atmosphere.
Between 5th West and 2nd East.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay, first to Mr. Maury, and then we'll hear from Craig.
Is this on already? If I can just make a couple of comments, this all started because when Thread submitted their plans for their building, one of the things that they anticipated, because they had gone back in time and looked at some of the photography of what the automotive dealership had been back in the day. And that sign existed, so their architect thought that that was kind of cool, and so their design reflected that. Our sign code doesn't allow it, and so when it came to the architectural review committee for approval, I think we commented that that sign was shown, but that it wouldn't be allowed, and that the architecture, I think the historical review committee said, well, that doesn't make any sense. If our purpose is to get them to restore it to what it was before, and the sign was an element of that, then we should approve it. And so the historical committee recommended that we do the work that we've done to bring this to you to try to reflect that. So that's one issue. I think it's important to recognize that this isn't coming from us. It's coming from the businesses in the downtown area that feel that there's a reason for this and a benefit that could be generated from it. I think one of the things that we've gravitated to as a reason for why we're supportive is one of the things we constantly get about the downtown core, especially, is the need for nightlife. That during the day, there's a lot of businesses that support restaurants and things of that sort, but that things can tend to be a little bit quiet at night sometimes. Now, I think that's getting better, but historically that's been a concern. Well, now we've got several different theater concepts that have been discussed in the downtown area, and some of that begins to be a reflection of what the downtown, I think everybody's hoping could become, right? I mean, Velour is a very successful music venue. To some extent, the ability to advertise, like you might see on a marquee, who the band is going to be and what times or what days or whatever, is kind of what happened back in time when Center Street was so vibrant historically. And I think you're gonna get some push to try to be supportive of that. Angel Studios is a wildly successful movie production company right here on Center Street. They love the ability to be able to advertise showings of the content that they create on their building, because otherwise you kind of drive down Center Street and you may or may not see Angel Studios, but you don't have any idea that this wildly successful movie production company that has more than 250 employees is right on Center Street. Or the one that we sold across the street from us right here, the empty piece of property that Tom Taylor and others are talking about building a historical, a theater, a little venue. They're going to want to be able to market that what's showing and when it's showing. We have a wildly successful film venue that's coming up. It's the Film Quest. Thank you very much. There's a lot of push because Sundance is buckling. The Provo could be a replacement for that. So anyway, whether or not any of that happens, some of this is a reflection of if there's the ability to tastefully recreate some of these advertisement opportunities like old theaters used to have, that maybe that's important to creating this nighttime environment that we want to support our downtown. I think we have to be careful. I think some of the reason why these signs went away was because there was an arms race for whose is bigger and whose is brighter or whatever, and we don't want to be, State Street in a city north of us that I think everybody thinks is a little bit unattractive. So I think we want to be careful, but I don't think being careful means neon signs are evil. We should never have one. I mean, there's a place right now with the old pharmacy where that's really nostalgic, right? And so I think if it's tastefully done in the right place, it can support this environment that we're trying to create. And I don't think the one size fits all option is appropriate. So I hate for us to just say, we don't want to do this because we don't want the worst case scenario. Of course, we don't want the worst case scenario. We can be careful so that we don't end up there. I don't know if that helps or not.
So we had Councilor Christensen next.
Yeah, attending the downtown board meetings where this is discussed frequently, I think it does make a difference to the downtown. I do not want signs in neighborhoods. We've already had those discussions. I don't think electronic signs in neighborhoods and outside of the downtown, I think it's very appropriate. And I think the criteria we have here helps to address those issues of let's not let it get out of hand. So I like that they're not flashing, it's not a Vegas race to see who's got the biggest. But I think this is very well contained, and I'm very supportive of this.
I think Councilor McKay is next.
I agree. I like it that when you look at Fred, for example, they could have built like a high rise. Yeah. They could have utilized that space so much more, and they chose not to. They chose to stick with the historical build of the building, which was really showing their dedication to Provo and to, they care about the story, right? And so I love it that they want to do the historical sign, and we have limits on it here where it won't get crazy. Like even last council, you know, I voted no on no more, I don't, on university is a strolling street, it's not a place for Instagram shots or a nightlife, but Center Street is. And I do think the signs make a difference in that part of it.
Counselor Bogdan.
So just to be clear, how exactly are we going to determine which business gets one of these signs and which business doesn't? Because if there's 3 per block face and then you have something incredible that comes in, let's say a movie theater that you want to have this, but there's already the 3 per block face.
Then they can ask for a text amendment. Yeah, we're gonna handle it.
But
first
then
come,
we're
first
gonna be
served.
starting to head down that road again, right?
Right.
So is it just first come, first
It
served?
is. Whoever gets permitted first.
Is
gets
there
it
any other
permitted
ideas
first.
that's better of what criteria could be added to that, or?
We felt that was a fair approach. There's a huge overriding demand for this sign type. It's a big expense, and it doesn't fit all the businesses downtown. So we don't perceive it being a problem. If it does become a problem, we can have another conversation with Downtown Alliance and so forth in those businesses. But until we get there, I think that the first come, first serve should work.
All right, Counselor Handley.
Could you remind me what the difference is between Gateway West and West Gateway zones?
Yeah, that.
Actually, it struck me for the first time because I don't think I ever knew that, yeah.
That zone got split about the time that Maverick came in on West Center Street. At that border in West, it became a different zone that allowed kind of different sign types, different setbacks and things like that.
So why do we want to extend it that far, I guess is the question.
This section 1438-105, that's already in code. So all the downtown sign types that are permitted, this being the 10th sign type, are permitted in all these zones. However, you'll notice in the introductory language of this one, it's limited to those with frontage on Center Street between 5th West and 6th.
Oh, okay. So we're not saying this could be, we could have marquee signs on West Center.
Right, so yeah, that language of block is just kind of the head of the chapter section.
That clarifies it. Yeah, I think I agree with what's been said. I think this is a unique kind of style and character issue with regard to downtown Provo that I think is one of our special features as a city, and I think this fits within that in a nice way.
All right. Any more comments? Thank you, Aaron. Okay, we are a little bit behind right now, but I believe in us. We can do this. Okay, so the next item is number 3, a discussion. This is a policy item referred from the Planning Commission. It's a discussion regarding an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding exceptions to signs and outdoor advertising regulations. This will be presented by Scott Johnson, our zoning administrator.
Thank you. Hopefully I can help you on time. A little bit better back on track. This is a quick, short amendment we have. Some of you may remember that earlier this year we had a complaint come to us regarding a campaign sign that was on private property that was electronic in nature. As we reviewed the code, we noticed that our code exemption for campaign signs was a blanket exemption except for in the public right of way. So the only thing we could enforce on were in regard to campaign signs were in the public right of way. And so this electronic sign that was in a residential neighborhood, we couldn't touch. And so this amendment is intended to allow us to address electronic campaign signs that would be placed in any area where other electronic campaign or electronic signs are not allowed. So that's the gist of this one. This is an item on your agenda tonight for consideration. Answer any questions.
Councilor Hogan.
Just spell it out for me like I'm a 5th grader here. Explain to me what change we're making.
So if you put a campaign sign in your yard and it's an electronic sign or has some type of animation, it's no longer allowed. Before this amendment, if the way the code currently is, somebody can put a little little trailer with a little sign that's electronic in their yard and advertise for any elected official that's running for office. And have it plugged into the property owner's home and run it 24/7. What this would do is say, if you essentially, any residential type neighborhood, this would no longer be allowed.
Yeah, thanks.
And I'd failed to recognize that Councillor Hoban has joined us. We're glad you're here.
For some time.
Yes, yeah, he's been here for a while, commenting wildly. Any other questions for Mr. Johnson on this matter? All right, and we feel that the language that we've got effectively addresses this. We'll be able to enforce on this appropriately.
Absolutely. I'll work with legal compliance on it, and we feel it's very enforceable.
Wonderful. All right, thank you so much.
I just had one comment.
Oh, back.
It doesn't have to do with this.
Okay.
In our last meeting during the work session, I made some comments about enforcement. And in my comments, I sounded like I was not giving credit to the good work that's being done on enforcement, especially around ADUs. My apologies to the good work that's being done. My concern was more that we're taking scooters to a Formula One race, and that's not the staff's issue. I think that's our issue to resolve. And I think the comments I made sounded disrespectful, and I wanted to apologize for any misunderstanding. I'm grateful for the good work that's done by your team.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's always good for us to pay attention to what we say and how it affects each other. And it's really important that we work to build our relationships, especially if we feel like we may have inadvertently caused harm. Thank you. All right, Brian, do we have a question on this?
Well, I just wanted to point out for tonight, when you get ready to vote on this, that I did when it came to me this week, I actually did some reformatting specifically to address the question that Councillor Garrett just leaned over and asked me. And he was a little bit confused about the fact that there were two different restrictions in the same sentence and got confused by the public property language. So I've broken it out so that there's now 3 subparagraphs. It says these signs may not be located in the public right of way, may not be animated signs. And if they are an electronic display sign, they're subject to all of the provisions of both the sign code and the lighting and hold time provisions. And so what that does is it says you can't have them in residential areas. And if you do have them in commercial areas, they still have to follow the brightness and hold time requirements. So, okay.
Excellent. Councillor Bogdan. Scott? We thought you were done, but you're not.
Scott, I want you to get your steps in. I'm just looking out for you. Nobody else but you, Scott. Do we anticipate, is there anything that we anticipate that we haven't covered? I mean, are we seeing anything anywhere else with election signs or anything else that because obviously we never thought this would happen and it did. Is there anything that we can like preemptively do, or do we feel like we've got it all?
Do you want me to answer that?
We knew we would do.
The answer is yes. There's a lot of things that we're missing. Solving the things that we're missing is really complicated and more complicated by some recent Supreme Court case law. But this is part of the zoning code. So we are hoping that we can address all of those issues in the zoning code rewrite, because doing them piecemeal is going to be would be kind of a nightmare.
So in that way, this is an interim solution that addresses this specific problem really well. We're aware that there are other problems, but this is not the time or the tool to address those.
We had at least one, maybe 2 meetings, and we got so far down into the weeds about how to resolve everything that we realized if we tried to resolve everything, we would not get anything done before the election season. So we decided to just do this for now.
Okay.
Thanks for your hard work and your team's hard work, and Brian, thanks.
Nice to know.
Okay, you can go now this time. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Okay, moving on to item number 4. This is a discussion regarding an ordinance amending the zone map classification of real property, generally located at 5544 North River Run Drive, from the OSPR zone to the medium density residential zone. This will be presented by Aaron Ardmore. Welcome back.
Thanks.
I'll skip by a lot of this and say the first minute because everybody in the room knows this property. So this is just a continuation of the River District residential project. Now that this is in Provo instead of Orem, they've come back with this zone change and project plan. The project plan was approved by Planning Commission. And this zone change has a development agreement with it to tie in the same proffers that were offered with phase one with the public trail easement and things of that sort. So that is up for review tonight. Do you have any questions on this one?
Counselor Christensen.
Again, disappointed that it's 24 more rentals. I'm not against rentals. I'm just for homeownership. I know this has a long tail to it. And I just want to express my concern that it takes us, I think it takes us in a direction that doesn't allow us to give people that opportunity. Second issue is around the right of way and just the trail along the river. Again, reading through the documentation, I wasn't clear in, they're clearly providing the easement. Are they also providing the landscaping? Are they maintaining it? Are there benches? Are there,
Yeah,
I
so
didn't pick that
it's
up.
not gonna be given the parks, it's all gonna be built and maintained by the developers in the HOA. It's just a public access easement perpetual through that section of the property.
And so that's actually part of the development agreement.
It is.
Okay, and is there any standard that the HOA is responsible for, or, I mean, how do you account for that to make sure? I'm sure this will be nice, but what kind of,
If it gets still updated or the landscape is not.
yeah, if it's well maintained, or if the look and the feel and things like that. Again, if the city was doing it, I'd have a pretty good idea of what that would look like. How do you know, or what makes you feel comfortable that this will be maintained as it should be in terms of a beautiful amenity along the river? That's what the neighbors are concerned about.
Also the code enforcement tools, I'm not really sure. On the back end, how we would ensure that.
I would just say that in this case, because it is all owned by one entity, and there's the front doors of units looking out onto the trail, I think it's in their best interest to keep it well maintained, or they're going to hear from their own renters. I think the way this will be managed, I'm satisfied that we won't have an ongoing maintenance problem, but if we do, well, because it's public access, if the public access becomes hindered because of the way it's being maintained, we'll go after them.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, do we have additional questions for Aaron on this item now? No, thank you, Aaron. Okay, with that, we are now back on schedule. So we will have a break. And it's starting right now, 2:55 as scheduled, and this will end at 3:15 or 3:10. You have 15 minutes. So go do your things and then come back. All right, thank you.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Now ready when you are. Let's do this.
All right, welcome back from our break. It is 3:10. So we'll move on to item number 5, a discussion regarding a resolution approving the appropriation of $13,743 in the general fund for a contractual sales tax increment post-performance payment to Days Market. This will be presented by Keith Morey, our Keith Morey. Go for it.
Thank you.
Go keep going.
Hopefully this one will be really quick. If you remember right, several years ago, we entered into a sales tax reimbursement agreement. And we did several of these, but the concept was that if the owner of the Days Market shopping center area made some improvements, that we would share back a portion of the increase in sales tax that hopefully those improvements would create to help kind of show our support for that. It was never meant to replace their investment, but basically just to show support. I think the original agreement said they were going to make about a little over $1 million worth of improvements. And anyway, so this is a reflection that, and just so you know, they only get a check back from us if there's an increase. So the fact that we've paid out, this is the 5th year in a row, shows that they're continuing to do better than they were doing when we made this agreement. So this year's amount is $13,742.50. And that brings the total we've contributed to what they've done to $64,902.12. Please.
Yeah, Keith, great job on this. Seems like it was a great thing for the city, for Days, and for the neighborhood there. Do we have an idea? Do you know, just off the top of your head, what, sales increased 20% for them or 30%? Do we have anything quantitative that kind of tells us what that went up?
Yeah, I didn't prepare that, but the calculation that we do actually shows, that 13,000 is a reflection of the percentage increase. I don't know that I actually calculated what that percentage is, but I can.
That's all right. I was just curious,
Yeah.
when we look at other projects like this, maybe you use this as a benchmark or whatever, but just curious. Maybe we can talk. If you can find it, I'd be curious to know if it's gone up 40% or 30%.
Yeah, I've got that. I've actually got the numbers. I just haven't done a percentage, but we can. It'd be easy to do. Yeah.
Councilor Bogdan.
Thank you, Keith, for the chart. I appreciate that.
Good.
That's what I asked for, and that's what you did, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Councilor Garrett.
So Keith, this is not just Days Market, right? It's the entire development.
Yeah.
It would include the hardware store.
Yeah,
Okay.
they basically did, improvements to the parking lot, to the facade, that whole, we kind of focus on Days Market because they were the recipient, and most of the improvements were to their store, in the interior of their store as well, although there were some facade improvements to the whole area along there.
So is the sales tax calculation just Days Market?
It goes back to Days Market, that's correct.
Oh, okay, not
Correct.
the hardware
No,
store.
correct.
Oh,
That's
okay.
exactly right.
Okay.
Councilor Christensen.
Every neighborhood in the city deserves a Days Market.
Amen.
And I'm grateful for, and again, this is a small thing on our part. But again, every neighborhood deserves a Days Market, and I'm glad that we're keeping those in doing all that we can to provide some incentive. So I'm grateful for the good work here.
Me too. Thank you very much. We'd love to do more of them, and it's maybe something just for you to keep in the back of your minds. The state 2 years ago eliminated the opportunity for cities to do these, which I think is unfortunate. I think that the problem that they were trying to solve for probably is one that should be addressed, but I don't think this is the right tool. And I think it limits our ability to do things exactly like this, where it's meaningful. If you think about it, if this could have been the difference between whether Allen's stayed or went, I would want to have that tool in my chest that I could utilize, right? So as we think about upcoming legislative sessions and what we can or can't do to influence, that ought to be one that we can kind of continue to work on, because I think what the state was trying to do was keep cities from competing for big box retailers. To keep, for example, Orem from being able to take Dillard's from Provo to Orem. And I understand that because obviously we may have, you could say that we suffered from that, correct? But I don't know that that's the solution. The market responds the way the market responds, and I don't think you can do that. blanket this kind of an approach. And if you really are concerned about sales tax distribution, what the state ought to do is have the courage to eliminate point of sales distribution and distribute based on population. But that's been a long argument that I've heard discussed for 30 years, as long as I've been around. It's the courage to do it, but that's the solution. So.
All right. Thank you so much, Keith. I think this is,
It's my show.
well, not yet, not yet. So if there's no objection, we will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council and convene as the Redevelopment Agency Governing Board by unanimous consent. Okay. So now we're moving on to the RDA board business. This is item number 6, a discussion regarding a resolution adopting the amended project area plan for the Freedom Plaza Community Development Project Area. So yes, it is Keith again. But you know, one entity can.
I didn't have a chance to go change clothes, or I would have, so that it was more dramatic. But...
Yes, put a hat on.
So this could be a long, complicated discussion, but I don't think it needs to be. Just simplistically, cities have the discretion to draw project area boundaries for redevelopment purposes. It's basically just a line on a map, right? But because we're good neighbors and we're good partners, the state law is designed so that when we anticipate doing that, we notify all the other taxing entities. So the school district gets a notification, the county does, the mosquito abatement district, water conservancy district, etc. When the Freedom Commons area was originally created back in the mid 2000s, you know, so somewhere around 2010, there was a discussion about this project area. And originally, the project area was defined to be where the 3rd District Court building is now. After that was done, we all go ahead, please.
It's the 4th district.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say?
3rd.
I'm sorry.
That's Matheson.
When after that was done, and we all reached the agreements that that's what we were going to do, the court came forward, and I wasn't here, so this is history, right? I'm just kind of telling you what I've come to understand, and determined that that block was a better location for the new courthouse that they wanted to build. And so there was a long discussion then about changing the project area boundary, having discussions with the different taxing entities. We began discussions with PEG about the project that they were going to build on the blocks that were basically directly east and up towards Smith, right? So everybody was going to agree that's what was going to happen. And then because the convention center was going to get built and parking didn't get built as quickly as, and we didn't have great relationships maybe with the county, we ended up in some litigation. And so a lot of that all got put on hold. So I wasn't here, I didn't make those decisions, but I'm trying to draw some assumptions that for whatever reason, the anticipated project area boundary that should have been corrected from where the courthouse is now, that was never done. And that's a significant legal process and a step that has to be taken, because it's one thing later on here in a minute, we're going to talk about creative project area, that line on the map, just to the east of us where the old city hall is. Once you define that project area, that becomes kind of the boundary for a redevelopment project. So if then you go and you enter into interlocal agreements with the other taxing entities to distribute property taxes differently than what the normal process would be, you can only do it within that colored area, right? So because that colored area was not corrected, we have a little bit of a problem. This is an attempt to go back and make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's like we should have done. And it's completely at our discretion to do this. This is an RDA function or the city function. It doesn't, the school district, the county, and whatever doesn't get to say no to what we're doing right now. There'll be subsequent conversations that we'll have with them about finalizing the interlocal agreements within this area. But this is the one step that's at our discretion that basically notifies them, look, this is our intent. And if we were back in time 10 years ago, this would have been the first thing that we would have done. And we would have had a conversation with them about why we were thinking about doing this and the conversations we were having about development. So does that help? Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. This is a very simple step that could have easily been taken 10 years ago that for whatever reason just got missed.
All right. It looks like,
Makes sense.
yes, you have given us a satisfactory explanation, except Board Member Hoban.
I'm just curious if it has a retroactive effect on it then, or we're cleaning this up clearly. Moving forward, we have a clean, clean line.
So it should have been done at the same time. We're gonna have to solve for it too. This is just the first step. And now we're gonna have to go back to the taxing entities and remind them of the previous discussions that we had, the presentations that we had, and finalize the interlocal agreements within that area. So there's still another step that needs to be taken.
But this has to happen first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. All right. Yeah, that's like,
All right.
this sounds good. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Okay. Our next item is number 7, a discussion regarding a resolution approving the appropriation of $214,600 in the tax increment affordable housing set aside fund received from redevelopment projects last fiscal year.
Okay. So as we all know, housing is an important issue to us, to the state and everybody else. So several years ago, the state legislature changed the redevelopment laws to basically say that any redevelopment project area has to have an affordable housing component. And if a developer comes forward and says, we're going to build $1 million townhomes, we're not interested in doing affordable housing, the state said, that's fine, then you can do an affordable housing set aside. So that the city at its discretion could put that money towards some other affordable housing project somewhere else, or to incentivize the developer to do that somewhere else. So that's exactly what happened in the mix at River's Edge. They determined that, I think part of it was they were a little far along in their vision of what they wanted to develop, and trying to create an affordable housing component kind of was a little bit different than what they wanted to accomplish. And so they were allowed to do this set aside. So that we have $214,000 that we received last year that went into the budget. And we had always anticipated doing something like this. It wasn't clear to me that we had set that aside and that we needed to come forward to you and actually tell you that we need to appropriate it. Bill is moving forward, Bill Pepperoni, with an affordable housing project in Northwest Provo on Center Street and 2000 Geneva and 2000 North. And one of the things that we're doing is using that money to purchase a piece of property there on the corner, and then partner with the housing authority to build an affordable housing project. So this is just appropriating that money so that we can move forward with that. The RDA is actually, got the money, and we're taking care of that because we need to move forward on the closing. This allows us to use the specific account that was set aside for affordable housing.
All right. Do we have board member questions on this? Board Member Bogdan?
Thanks, Keith.
You bet.
Is this all the money that we have set forth for affordable housing, and do we anticipate any more in the future?
Well, we will. So we will continue to get money from the mix of River's Edge
Oh, okay.
every year, and for other projects that might meet the same criteria. If there's another redevelopment project that got built that decided they didn't want to build their own affordable housing component, they would fall into the same obligation. So over time, this could potentially become a bigger fund that we can use in other projects.
Do we have a time limit on from the time we get it to the time we spend it?
It's usually when the tax distribution occurs from the county, so we should have more this year.
But I mean, when we have to spend it, from the time we get it to the time we have to spend it.
But there's no, from my knowledge, Adam might know better. I don't think there's a time period on when it needs to be spent by.
Okay, and then, so how many years will the River's Edge give us? Is it gonna be 214 every year, or?
Yeah, through the life of their redevelopment project area, which is almost 20 years, it's not quite 20 years.
Oh, wow. So this could actually help bring more affordable housing
Yeah,
for years to come.
$14,000 will go up because it's based on the property values within the project itself, so it'll probably be a little bit more year by year.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
Do we have other projects that are putting money into this pot? So just the mix is the only one we've got right now. And is part of the reason that they're doing that instead of doing the housing, was it because of the way the project changed hands?
I think that was part of it, yeah. And I think, you Brighton Homes kind of came in new to the market trying to figure out how to solve a problem. And they had a great housing project, and then they're trying to figure out how to do commercial, which really isn't in their normal development strategy. And, then kind of mixing that up with an affordable housing component, which is something else that they don't do, I think, which is more complicated than they were willing to do. And they just said, yeah, let's just take a portion of the increment and do the housing set aside and we'll call it good.
Okay. And so this 214 is just the amount that we need for this project, but how much did we get from the mix?
That's the total 214.
It's exactly 1 to 1.
Yeah, I don't know what that. For that piece of property.
Just under that, but very close to 210.
So it's just
210.
coincidental, yeah. But the 214 is the total amount.
That's a wonderful coincidence. Okay, Board Member Bogdan, you had another question.
So with the school district having their, I guess, their new policy for no residential units for the RDA, how is that going to affect this in the future?
This already exists. So they can't, and so let's clarify. So the school board's policy is that if I were to bring a new redevelopment project proposal to them tomorrow, and one of the elements within that project area was housing, their kind of bullet list potentially suggests that that's a conflict and that they might not support it because they don't want to build housing that basically creates more impact on school districts, right? I mean, I sympathize with their position. I wouldn't say that I agree with it. And I think the fact that the state is creating other ways that you can do tax increment deals like the HTRZ, which forces all taxing entities to participate at a certain point because housing is so important, is a little bit at odds with what the school district has done. But I sympathize with their situation. But this was done previously. It doesn't have anything to do with their new guidelines. And so this project isn't affected by what the school district did.
But it can potentially affect whatever we want to do in the future, right?
It could protect a new project area, but not the mix of River's Edge.
Okay. Thanks.
You bet.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Maury while we've got him on the hot seat? No? Okay, we'll go on to the next one and see if we've got questions for you there. So this is item number 8, a discussion regarding a resolution of the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City designating a survey area for the proposed city center community reinvestment project area. We have allotted 45 minutes for this item. I think we're going to have a good time. Let's go.
Good. Just looking for refreshments in the middle of this or anyway.
We can get you water.
So we're in the middle of kind of doing our analysis, and so is the developer is potentially looking at the old city hall site, OB. They're doing their market analysis on housing opportunities, on hotel demand, on commercial demand, on residential demand. And we're doing a parking analysis that we've seen the first draft of, and I think we just actually got this afternoon a corrected draft, and so we should get the parking analysis soon. So we're anticipating probably here within the next couple of months, seeing something from OB on what they think the market would suggest could make sense on that site. If they're going to move forward with a boutique style hotel, how many rooms that might be, if they're going to do some residential, what that might look like and what the retail might look like, and some proposals. So in anticipation of that, one of the things we had long contemplated, and just to be clear, OB has not come to us with anything yet that suggests that they need help. Everything that OB has told us so far is that their intent is to buy the piece of property for us at market value or the appraised value that we had at the time. But I don't know, I kind of think I know a little bit about what I'm doing, and I'm anticipating that I could see them coming back to us at some point and saying, look, this project would be better, or it would be easier if we solve this infrastructure problem, or they may be able to solve all those problems, and they may say, we're going to build our own project, but if you guys are going to solve your parking problem, you're going to have to do it on your own. So, I mean, you all know we just closed on the Marriott parking structure, so we have some of that money, but there probably is going to be a gap. So we may need to use every tool that we have to accommodate or to accomplish some of that. And I just think that, of course, we have more discretion and more flexibility and more tools within the redevelopment bag than we do in the city bag. Disposing of city property is much more complicated and cumbersome, and I think any attorney will tell you that it's probably it may be a little more complicated than it needs to be in Provo. But those same strings and burdens don't exist within redevelopment agency. We have more discretion. And so I'm anticipating just the creation of this colored circle on a map, basically, right? It just says, hey, look, we're evaluating the potential of creating a project area here. Because that's one step that I know I can do now that doesn't require any support or contribution from any other taxing entity, but I can get that out of the way, right? So that if Obi comes to me in a couple months and Bill and says, here's what we want to build, but there's an infrastructure gap where you guys are going to have to solve this on your parking, I at least can come to you and say, well, one of the steps is done. We created the circle on the map that shows that it's a project area. Now, if we actually think we need to do something, and if that something includes agreements with taxing entities, all we would have to do is work on the interlocal agreements within this circle on the map. Does that make sense? So this is a, I might just cut out. Can you hear me okay? So, you want to take that one? Thanks. Okay, I'm just trying to get some of the steps done that I know I can't get done, so that it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't commit us to anything. I'm suggesting that Obi needs help. I'm just kind of preparing for the future in case we need it, because it'll be one less thing we have to do.
All right. I believe you're open for questions now.
I'm probably so.
Is it just me? Okay, I have questions.
Please.
Okay, so there's a lot that can be done in downtown. We have a lot of old properties, old buildings that are really ripe for redevelopment. I'm wondering what the advantage is to drawing this proposed very limited area as opposed to drawing a much larger downtown redevelopment area and maybe doing multiple projects within that larger area.
I'm wildly supportive of the way you think. But so this is a discussion, right? I drew a line on a map based on what I knew I could defend. And what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to draw a map that might have been bigger, reflecting what I think might make more sense. Because we already, I mean, I've already gotten a lot of comments and questions from you about why are we doing this? What's the point? What does it mean? Does this mean Obi's already come and said they don't have enough money? I mean, already our reaction was a little bit excited from the perspective, right? That maybe there's a problem that we're already trying to solve for. What I didn't want is I didn't want, for example, all the residents south of 100 South to have the same reaction. Oh my gosh, the city's going to come take my property. What does that mean? Where am I going to live? Of course, we're not doing any of that, but I was trying to avoid causing concern where there wasn't any need for one. Now that we're here in a discussion where we can explain what we're thinking, yeah, I think it probably makes sense to draw the boundary much bigger than that, because again, you could draw the circles so that it's the entire downtown area. It doesn't mean that when we actually do a project that we wouldn't specifically define with the interlocal agreements that the actual area that we're, I don't know, correcting the tax distribution is smaller, right? So if the entire circle took up a whole downtown area, the interlocal agreement, if we ever needed one with the county and the school district, might just be for the whole city hall block. And that's okay, right? Because as long as it's within this broad, bigger circle, I'm fine. The big problem is if the project area that I want to do overlaps outside of the project area boundary, then I don't have the right to anticipate or talk about tax distribution outside of my color line. So I love the idea of doing that. And I think there's a lot of reasons for doing that. And I'll give you just a couple and then you can ask me other questions. Gordon Haight, your public works director now, has suggested that at some point he could see we were really trying to be intentional about solving for future problems along Center Street, that the creation of a redevelopment project area along Center Street to replace infrastructure might be meaningful. Well, I don't know, maybe this is the right time to say, let's anticipate that and let's draw the circle bigger. As Bill has a vision that I think is absolutely beautiful, that at some point the promenade that exists in the new skin block between our offices and our parking structure on First South, that something beautiful like that continues further west along 100 South. Well, if that was ever to be the case, if we wanted to do something like that, this kind of a tool would be perfect for that kind of use as well. There are other buildings on the north side of Center Street that we've talked about, maybe need to be addressed, or maybe potentially have some light that we want to fix. So yeah, maybe the project area being drawn a little bit more, the Center Street would make sense as well. So I'm happy to draw it as big as we want to build it. But I wanted to make sure we all had this conversation, because I don't want to stand up on my own and have to defend that. And if you've all told me that we're supportive and we all understand why, and we've had this public hearing, then if people do become concerned, we can all point back to this moment in time and say, this is why we did it. Remember the conversation? And I'm fine with that.
Right, so we could draw it bigger so that we have possibility, but we are not in any way condemning property within it.
It's very simple. I have a battle or attorneys here if you want to make sure that I'm not blowing a lot of smoke.
So far, so good.
It's really no more than a circle or a rectangle on a map. But what we've done, the only extra step is we've sent notices to the different taxing entities just to say, hey, look, we just want you to know, we're kind of thinking about something over here, and we love your input or your thoughts.
And if we drew it larger, could we also send notice or inform the property owners with this area, like, look, this would be an opportunity. If you want to come to us with proposals, you're in this zone that we really care about.
Sure.
And that way we could be kind of soliciting suggestions from the current property owners or people who are looking at investing here.
That's correct. And it might mean it's not like a zone change where we send out notifications to individual property owners, but it is noticed. And if we wanted to take the extra step of noticing individual property owners, we could do that. We could.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to clarify, you know, right after I said Keith was saying everything right, then he just went off the rails.
I think I was the one like.
So this is step 0, basically. All this resolution would do is it's basically direction from the agency board to agency staff saying, hey, this is an area where it might make sense to do a project area.
We're still going to have to come back and have you actually.
So we don't have notice requirement or anything. This is step 0.
Right.
When we get further into the process, obviously all property owners, all taxing needs to get notices. But this is just a, hey, why don't you take a look at this? This might be something to do.
And to make sure you as an RDA are supportive of what we're talking about.
Yeah. All right. Handley.
I really like the idea of expanding it. I'm curious to know if maybe this was what you were alluding to, Gordon, but does that include projects with regard to the street?
It could.
So if we're talking about, because we've looked at like price tags for modest changes to Center Street, very significant changes to the traffic flow, and to get the traffic flow off of Center Street so that it could be more pedestrian and so on.
Exactly.
And the price goes way up when we start talking about major changes. But if this is the kind of designation that would assist not only revitalizing some of the buildings and the businesses, but also the street, I think that would be even better.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It just gives us a boundary to be able to do those kinds of things within, and the redevelopment agency has more flexibility and tools to do that. Because maybe all of a sudden you create a public improvement district along Center Street within that, or whatever tool we think makes the most sense to help us make those improvements that we want to make.
Okay. All right. Mr. Christensen.
A question and a comment. The question, is there any cost to creating the survey area?
No, maybe because we'll do the legal description of what the actual boundary will be working on within house, so there's no cost to it.
Okay. The second is just a comment. I couldn't agree more. I think we should be much more expansive than just that block. I love the idea, love your thinking, Rachel, about looking more holistically at the downtown.
Good.
And I like the step 0. That's prudent. Let's take the next steps. Let's let people know what's available. And I think that's a dialogue worth having with our neighbors downtown.
Good. That's fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Would it be useful now to look at a map and say kind of how large we want this to be, or would it be better for you to come back to us with suggestions? Like, what's a good way to define the expansion?
I'm happy to, and from my perspective, as we were talking about this, in my mind, I was kind of envisioning maybe bringing you back a couple of different maps, 3 or 5 or whatever, that show some different alternatives for what the boundary could potentially be, depending on how big or how grand we want to be with this. And then you could tell me this was close or this was not, or whatever. If that makes sense, I'm happy to work on that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of opportunity down here, and like some things, like we need more high density housing in this downtown area, which is also a transportation oriented district that goes along with our station area master plan. But in order to get that density of people, I think we need to do sewer upgrades here. So we're kind of getting stuck on some
I
things.
agree. And what would help me would be if you would either meet with me or call me or share with me your thoughts about what you think ought to be included with that, in that, so that the draft maps that I come up with include as much of those, so we avoid, me taking a stab at it and having to do that 3 or 4 times. So if you've got specific project areas that you're sensitive about, or you think that ought to be included, just let's meet and talk about it. You can show me what you think and we'll put it in there.
And will it be possible to do multiple projects within one large area?
Of course, so the only barrier that we have to how many projects we can do is the gap that the state has in place that says that only 5% of our total assessed property value can be in an area at any one given time. And so, I think we have, over the years, some of the projects have dropped off, and so we do have some room. Mountain Vista is no longer on there. The mall's not on there anymore. Some of those have dropped off, so we have flexibility, I think, to amend that. And as the property values grow within a city, the amount of area that you could potentially include grows as well. So I think we have plenty of room to do that. And as you do one over time, another one drops off. So I think we have the flexibility to do that.
That 5%, is that the assessed value, or is that like a surface area calculation?
No, it's just total assessed value, property value of the city.
Okay, I would imagine that we've got some relatively valuable properties in downtown. So do we want to cut out some that are valuable that are already done so that they aren't?
Well, that just makes it really complicated.
Yeah.
We can look at the map and see, right? But I
Okay.
mean, that begins to make it complicated, especially if you're talking about.
Yeah, I want to
infrastructure
clean.
improvements, because infrastructure improvements don't stop
Mhm.
just because they pass in front of an expensive piece of property. And so, you wouldn't want to create a problem where now I'm a little bit hamstrung because that isn't within my project area, and that's part of one of the improvements that needs to be done.
So our constraining factor may be the value of the downtown properties.
Of the city as a whole, or just the total valuation of the city.
Right.
It's like I said, I think we've got more than enough room I don't think we need to worry about it at this point.
Good. I'm glad that's not a worry. All right. Anything else that you guys are excited about for downtown? Come
Good
on.
things.
I'm so excited about downtown. Yes, Malia.
Just as staff for timing and next steps, and maybe we're gonna get to this, but like, how do we want to set up the feedback between the board and then Keith to make sure that that's like productive and timely and
Because
within
you don't
best
want
practices?
all 7 of us coming to you with different map ideas.
I don't care if you do. I would love the interaction with you. I mean, please call me. Let's have a meeting. I don't mind that at all. I'd rather hear what you want. I mean, if you want to go through your council staff, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. But I mean, we don't get to talk enough as it is. I'd be more than thrilled if you want to sit down and have a conversation and show me what your pinch points are
Yeah.
in the area and what you think. And that could be very productive. So I
Yeah.
would hate for you to feel like you can't talk to me. That's what I'm here 10 hours a day for.
Well, we don't want to monopolize your time or pop in and mess up your schedule.
That's fine. If you want to meet with me.
Okay.
If you'd like us to suggest 3 or 4 maps to you and use that as a starting point, we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
whatever you want.
Yeah, so perhaps you get us the maps in within 2 weeks? Or
We'll
how?
probably have something next week.
Okay, and then we'll respond, and if there's desire, we can all get together and have a party in your office and admire your plans. Okay.
Well, it's been a lot of meetings
Time, right?
and no deal.
All right.
So Keith, I
Board
just have a
Member
comment.
Ogden.
I just have a comment. So Franklin and Franklin South need stability heavily, right? And so my plea, as you look at this and as we look at housing units, that we look at something that's going to bring some stability to the Franklin South areas, especially the schools, that they go to,
Yeah.
because it is a problem and it's becoming ever growing problem, especially with just the cycling of kids that come through, and there's no stability.
agree. I agree.
There's no stabilities in their church, there's no stabilities in their school, and it's really a problem.
I agree.
So
I
when we look at
appreciate
this, I really would appreciate some kind of housing something that's gonna bring stability there.
No, I agree. I mean, listen, we've talked about this a lot, and it's awkward for me to, I'm not. Utah historically has a pattern of cautiously incentivizing economic development opportunities. If you compare us to other states that have a lot of money, like Texas that has a lot of oil money, you know, our selling point is the incredible quality of life we have here. So when Google is trying to make the decision between whether they're putting their corporate headquarters here or in Texas or somewhere else, we kind of point to the mountains and say, look, we got an incredible place to live, an incredible workforce. If you want to come be part of that, we want you here. But if you're looking for $10 billion, we probably aren't someone you want to play with. Well, I mean, I think economic development Provo is that on steroids, right? Because we're incredibly fiscally conservative about what we do. But I do think that there are times and places where having a fund that we all have set aside where economic development could potentially be utilized to bridge a gap or to solve a problem outside of tax increment ought to be something that we ought to consider. If those types of areas are meaningful to you, and we had the potential where we did some kind of a $1 million, low interest or no interest loan if they did this or that or whatever, I think we could do that. And some of the property that we sold in Mountain Vista, we've got several $1 million sitting aside that could be used for things like that. But I don't have a specific project in mind, because that hasn't been how we've operated. And I don't want us to get into a position where we shift our paradigm or our philosophy, because I'm not interested in whining and dining businesses to come here if it's about money. I'm very content telling people that we're the best performing city in the country, and you want to come here whether we can pay you to or not. I'm comfortable with that. But I also recognize that there could potentially be places where we want to solve a problem, and having some flexibility or some financial capacity to do that could be meaningful. But I don't know exactly what that looks like. You have to help me decide that. But I have said ever since I started here that we began to put aside $100,000, and eventually that grew to be a $500,000 fund. And I would have to come to you and say, look, here's a need. We've got $500,000 in this fund. What would you think if we took $100,000 and did X? And we all agreed that could be powerful. But right now we haven't even gotten past step one. So I guess to your point, I agree 100%. I think there are more things that we can do, but if that's really what we want, we kind of need to shift and maybe allocate some funds and outline some criteria for how and when and what kinds of situations we would want to use those.
Yeah, and earlier in the year, we had talked about kind of doing RDA visioning. Now that we've got a new board, and there is an opportunity for us to be visionary and proactive. You have done a fantastic job over the years of bringing us projects and working with partners and doing things. And the board has been happy to support those. But there are some things that I believe we're able to identify from living in the community that may not be on the radar. So we should work together as a board to make a plan or create these opportunities.
I just don't know what to do. I know what the problem is. I need help solving it. So I'm throwing out a problem. I'm more than willing to have everybody's input on how do we solve this huge problem that we have in these neighborhoods.
And some of it could potentially be just the fact that we have a fund set aside that we're trying to buy up pieces of property here and there in specific areas so that we have more flexibility to stimulate redevelopment. So anyway.
Yeah. All right. We do have more time allocated for this discussion if you have more excitement about downtown and the RDA.
Well,
But only if you have excitement.
Only
I
if
agree.
excitement.
We only want
I
excitement.
love the idea of the visioning. What's your recommendation in terms of how we go about that and when we do that? I mean, is that something we do as a formal part of this, or is that a separate work meeting?
I think that would be a separate meeting. I liked when we did as a council our budget priority meeting where we all came with ideas and we discussed them and voted and kind of created priorities. I think something like that would be really productive in the RDA. And we've gotten good information now with background on the RDA, how it's been working. So I think we are in a position that if we go back and read all of our briefings, then we would be able to effectively make a vision.
Love that idea.
So we can do that either as time in a work meeting, we can set that aside, or if we want to have a special meeting or a retreat type of meeting where we have a little bit more leisure to maybe be less formal, but do the thing where you're writing on the giant Post-it notes and moving ideas, and we're more interactive because you get kind of different qualities of ideas when you're doing a different kind of facilitated experience. So we have both of those as options to us. Yeah. Mr. Hanley.
Well, just a thought that, yeah, maybe, I mean, I like the idea of a broader discussion, but maybe it would be helpful to go by regions of the city. Maybe we set aside an hour, similar to what we do with the budget season, but we say we're going to have an RDA discussion about, Southwest Provo, or about the Franklin neighborhood, or about, West Side issues, or East Side issues, Southeast issues, and kind of dig into those, specifically with redevelopment. Obviously, there's other issues beyond that, but I mean, if we just say what are the needs and what are the opportunities in that area of the city that the RDA could be more proactive about, that could be facilitated by some staff help in advance, that we go, if there's a sort of look at the maps and looking at some of the properties and areas of concern, and then you come to us with some possibilities. I don't know. I'm just brainstorming here for a moment, but it seems like if we just did a open-ended thing, it might be a little less focused than if we kind of moved from portion of the city to portion.
And I agree that the one thing that I just in thinking about this as we're brainstorming, just from past experience, I think, just think about this. When I was working for West Valley City, that old Kmart that's clear out on 5600 West and West Valley, familiar, had just been a poor performer. We've been tracking sales tax on that forever. We had a plan to help them redevelop that site, and eventually got a hold of representatives at Kmart and said, look, this is what we want to do, and we know that the store is underperforming, and we're sympathetic, and we want to help you make it better. Kmart corporate responded back and told us, that our concept of total performance was different than theirs, and they were content. And also with the production of that store, and basically just flag height. So, I mean, I guess I agree with George 100%. I mean, we want to be productive about what kinds of conversations we're having, but our perception of what is wrong in an area, or in a neighborhood, or in a commercial area, sometimes is different than the tenants there. And they may be perfectly content with their standard of living or the experience there. And so we have to be cautious about, I don't know, poking them in the eye, right? So from my perspective, sometimes drawing that area is a little broader and maybe talking about general concerns. That area needs to refresh. The infrastructure is declining. Some of the properties are decaying. We need to do some things to refresh opportunities within there. That's supportive, right? And we're talking about how do we lift the area that you live in or that you do business in, instead of saying you are a problem and we're here to fix you, because some people present that.
I certainly can think of some properties that I have those feelings towards. Yes.
So I would encourage us, instead of thinking in terms of a strategic plan, I'd like to encourage us to think in terms of strategic planning. It's the verb, I think, that really makes a difference. So rather than just doing one big comprehensive thing and lots of information, just the heft of it could actually get in the way of actually taking action. I'd suggest we actually start small. Let's take the downtown, for instance. And let's get a planning process where it's not just once a year, or it's not just quarterly, but it's a very active approach. And that we take something that we can really double click on and go deep with, rather than a big exhaustive plan. So if there was an area like downtown, if we were all in agreement to that, let's start there. Let's put the emphasis on the planning constantly. And then let's bring in other areas and let's add others. And each quarter, let's add something else. That I would encourage us to actually start small and get some things done, because nothing will motivate us more than some success and engaging and actually doing.
I agree with you. I agree. Kind of a different example, but when I was working for Ogden City, you know, we used some of the HUD funds that we got, and we would go into a neighborhood and we would buy up a couple of homes on a block. And some of them needed to be torn down and some of them could be rehabilitated. And next thing you know, you would find a neighbor who would say, what are you doing on my street? Well, we're fixing this up or whatever. Well, does the city have any money? Because I'd love to paint my house. So $5,000 to help a neighbor paint a house. And in one block in particular, there was two older sisters that were 80 something years old that couldn't really maintain their yard. And so they turned the sprinkler systems off so they didn't have to maintain it. And the sprinkler systems were broken and didn't work. So I don't know, I think we spent $7,000 and helped them redo their sprinkler systems. And all of a sudden within a 1 block area, we had transformed a neighborhood just with the investment in a couple of homes. And it completely changed the attitude within the neighborhood of who Ogden was and what their neighborhood potentially is. So I agree with you 100% that some of these small tweaks have big rippling effects within a neighborhood or a community that make a big difference.
Okay, so going forward, what I'm hearing from the board, and I want to be corrected if I've heard this incorrectly, is that Keith will get us some preliminary maps. We'll do that. We can do that through email, and he's open to us setting up a meeting to talk with him in greater detail if either he or we feel that email is not sufficient. While he has stated he has this wide open door, we still want to be respectful of his time. So we will be more respectful than you are requiring. But also because we want to maintain that kind of respect for all of our interactions with the administration.
I want to be very clear, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
And if you guys see this, you should never hesitate to reach out, because that's why we come to work here today.
But those first communications we'll do by email so that the whole council knows what's going on. And then when we do have meetings with you, we'll try to report back to the rest of the council too, so that we don't have to do lots of repetition or redundancy. Like, we can all know what we all know together, and that will be good. In the meantime, while he's getting maps, we all can be thinking about downtown areas that we would like to see, or projects that we think would be good, pie in the sky kind of things, realizing that all we're doing with this is defining an area in which opportunities can happen, but we will not be forcing anyone to take these opportunities. Is that right? Okay. Second part of it is we can think about other parts of the city or things that we want to do, but we are not necessarily going to have a meeting to discuss those areas until we get through drawing this line and seeing how we feel about the various projects that could go in here. And by learning through this process, working together, we'll be better equipped to look at the city more widely, at our priorities more widely, and thinking about informs our planning so that whatever project comes to us, it will be effective at meeting our goals. Are we good on that?
You're good at summarizing.
You've done it.
Can I just add one quick thought? And that is that if there's ever an on-site visit that would be fruitful for the council, I'd certainly be open to that. I mean, if there, certain areas, I mean, in the downtown, or as we move around to different parts of the city, especially in preparation for meetings, I always find that helpful anyway. I mean, I try to do that. And sometimes I think, well, I've been there. I know that part of the city, but then actually kind of walking the streets and seeing it through the eyes of this kind of a discussion, I might suddenly, see things I didn't notice before.
Yeah, and it is possible for us to do field trips during the work meeting.
Field trips.
So if we got done right now, we could just go walk around
The
the
trip we
street.
did to Thread was so valuable. I read all about it, heard about it, but actually going and seeing the work, that was a game changer. So I agree.
Yes, Bogdan.
Okay, so I have a question. Yesterday, I learned more about a trailer park. I'm gonna have to, I went past it today to figure out
With
what it's called.
Lamplighters?
This isn't Lamplighter,
Oh,
this is
that-
Leisure Village, which is
Okay.
north of the river.
Okay.
Apparently Leisure Village is not a traditional trailer park. It's actually all the lots are homeowner lots. I didn't know that. Anyway, Energy was saying that they're having a problem with, I guess back in the older days, some of these trailer parks were not, the utilities weren't put in correctly. And so they're having issues there where there's a lot of issues, but they've approached these people and for some reason they don't want Energy to come in and repair where the boxes are in the front instead of in the back. And I asked if a lot of that had to do with their financial situation, if they could even afford that. So I guess my question would be is, if we put something like this in an RDA, would this be something that would benefit Leisure Village? Something like that, where they could get some of those repairs done at minimal cost to the residents that own the properties?
We have the different enforcement cases on bill.
No, that's.
So, generally speaking, when you do a redevelopment project area, you're doing them in areas where a significant amount of property tax increase is going to take place from an investment, right? Because that's the tool that you're going to use. If the property value is here and I'm going to build something wonderful and the property value goes to here, then this amount in between is what I have to work with, right? So if in a situation like that, where maybe the property values are lower and my lift is only going to be this much, it means I only have this much to work with and it becomes much more difficult to solve problems. So in some of those cases, what you'll find is a redevelopment project area will be created in a bigger area that maybe includes a commercial area. Some of that gets folded into it because now we're going to use the lift in the higher property value area to benefit the surrounding neighborhood. And so I'm not saying that we can't, Becky. I'm just saying that in your specific example, some of that gets to be a little bit difficult because I don't know how much lift you're actually going to get.
So like if we did that, plus maybe the Smith's property to the south, and maybe the trailer park that is Lamplighter. And put like that whole thing into it.
Well, what it would really take, it would be, for example, if you had a developer that said, look, there's 5 acres next to this, that I want to build a 20-story high-rise complex with $1 million townhomes. Now, all of a sudden, that's an incredible lift. And this amount of increment I could use to offset some of the concerns you're talking about. That's only, I like everything this whole conversation. The only thing we have to be careful about or make sure that we understand is it's one thing for us to have a vision about an area that we think we want to do something about. And unless we have an investor or a developer that wants to partner with us, we're basically just kind of identifying concerns, right? Because we're not the ones that are going to make these improvements. We're relying on the development community to help bring this up. And so
But it does send a signal though,
no,
right?
yeah, absolutely, 100%. And it does let the community know that there's a tool here that wasn't there before. So I agree with you, George, 100%. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I'm just making sure we're all clear that wishing doesn't necessarily mean our wishes come true, right? It's important to wish, but we also have to have some context to make sure that we're grounded about the fact that that wish may not come true today. It may take some time for that to happen. And in your case, trying to find the right resources, the right partner that's similarly invested around that area that can help us becomes really important. And we may have to work together to be really creative about how do we do that.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Christensen.
I would love to see us spend much more time on redevelopment. As a council, this is always a kind of a footnote piece of what we do. And I'd love to see us put more time and energy signaling what it is that we want. Totally get that that's just one part of it. But I think that if we did a better job and we're much more proactive, it makes it a lot easier for you than to do the developing. And I would be willing to put more time into this RDA portion.
Yeah. Malia, would it be possible for the memos and the RDA background materials that have already been prepared and sent out to be sent to us again so that we can easily see those again and review them? Because there's been a lot of research that our staff has done to help us understand this tool and how it works. And I think reading those again will probably be helpful as we're looking at certainly the center area, but maybe more broadly. Yes, Mr. Sanders.
I'm just wondering, are you referring to like some of the preparation materials, for example, like the NORDA projects and the mixed projects? Or are you referring to like the RDA handbook and other things like that we prepared for you?
I was thinking more about the handbook and
Okay.
everything.
Got it.
Yeah, not, I mean, looking at specific projects might be helpful because you can see how those have been done, but I was looking more for our general information.
Yeah, I remember we've done a little bit of research on that stuff, so we'll reset that.
Thank you. Mr. Garrett.
Keith, do you have an update on the redevelopment of Center Street and First East, that project? Does that project have a developer?
Center Street and
First East.
You're talking about the Blue Sky project.
Yes.
So they're still developing their concept plan. They have a little bit of a different perspective on what they think they can do on that block than what our code allows.
I see.
And so we're having a little bit of back and forth. I mean, just as an example, they think they can build on the property line. And we've told them that we don't think that that's doable, and they're convinced that it is. So we basically said, well, show us how. So we're kind of a little bit of that back and forth, but they're, to my knowledge, they're working on that. They don't have a project we're actually, we've given them an approval on, but we're kind of batting back and forth their concept and corrections and things like that. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, if there is no objection, we will now adjourn the Redevelopment Agency Board of Provo City work meeting by unanimous consent.
You're here.
Do we have, you have an objection? I'm going off of this. Do we have a closed meeting that we need to have? We're going to keep the RDA board open right now, my friends. Okay, objection has been noted. We have not adjourned this. Do we have language for closing the meeting?
We probably, there's a, if I can help out there is an item that would be good for the RDA board members to discuss in closed meeting, and it has to do with reasonable imminent litigation, is the appropriate reason for closed meeting under state law. So it would be appropriate for the board member to close the meeting.
Do we have a board member who would make a motion to close this meeting? Okay, the second?
I'd second that.
Okay, board member Garrett has moved that we close the meeting. It's been seconded by board member Bogdan. We will now do a vote. Board member Garrett. Handley.
Yes.
Bogdan.
Yes.
McKay.
Yes.
Whipple is yes. Hoban.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Okay, we have now voted to close the meeting by a vote of 7-0. That's unanimous. So we will leave this room and reconvene for the closed meeting in the pre-function room.
Recording stopped.